The train car smelled of wood smoke and unwashed bodies. Clara Ashford sat rigid in the third-class compartment, her gloved hands pressed flat against the folded newspaper in her lap. The Philadelphia Inquirer, 3 days old. The ink had begun to smudge from her nervous handling, but the headline remained viciously clear. Female surgeon faces criminal charges in Vanderbilt. Scandal. Her hands trembled. She willed them to stop. They did not obey. Outside the window, America scrolled past in endless variations of brown. First, the factories of Pennsylvania smokestacks like accusing fingers against the sky. Then the farmlands of Ohio autumn wheat, already harvested fields reduced to stubble. Then the great flat nothing of Nebraska, where the horizon stretched so far it made her chest ache with a peculiar hollow feeling. 3 days on this train. 3 days of watching her reflection in the window glass, wondering if anyone would recognize the face beneath the severe traveling bonnet. 3 days of jumping at every conductor's footstep, certain he carried a warrant with her name inscribed in official script. Dr. Clara Margaret Ashford. Surgeon, criminal. The words tasted like copper in her mouth. She had not planned to become a fugitive. Then again, she had not planned most of what her life had become. She had planned to attend medical school, yes. Had planned to prove that a woman's hands could be as skilled with a scalpel as any man's. Had planned to change the world one surgery at a time, to stand in operating theaters and hear the whispers of admiration rather than scandal. She had not planned to flee her own success like a thief in the night. 72 hours ago, she had been Dr. Ashford, chief resident at Pennsylvania Hospital, the youngest woman to ever hold the position. 72 hours ago, she had performed a surgery that saved Eleanor Vanderbilt's life, removing an ectopic pregnancy that would have killed the woman within days. 72 hours ago, she had believed that skill and science would be enough. Then Dr. Marcus Webb had walked into the hospital administrator's office with forged documents, with witness statements he had purchased from desperate orderlies, with a story so perfectly crafted that truth became irrelevant in its shadow. Criminal abortion, 15 years in prison. The memory made her stomach clench. She closed her eyes and saw it again. The moment Webb's mouth had curved into that small, satisfied smile. The moment she understood that her gender made her guilty before any trial could begin. The moment she realized that fighting would mean years of her life spent in legal battles, she could not afford defending actions that needed no defense except to a world determined to see women as incapable of such delicate work. So instead, she had run. The train lurched. Clara's eyes snapped open. A farmer across the aisle was staring at her newspaper, her heart hammered against her ribs. She folded the paper quickly, tucked it into her carpetbag, forced her breathing to slow. The farmer looked away, uninterested. Just a tired man heading west, nothing more. She pulled her medical bag closer, feeling the familiar weight of instruments inside. Forceps, scalpels, surgical silk. Her mother's obstetric tools passed down through 2 generations of women who had delivered babies in parlors and kitchens because hospitals would not grant them privileges. Clara had promised herself she would be different, would be better, would force the world to see women as healers rather than decorative objects. Now those same instruments made her a fugitive. The train crossed into Wyoming territory as the sun bled orange across the western sky. Clara watched the mountains rise in the distance, purple and ancient, and utterly indifferent to human suffering. There was something honest about that indifference. The mountains did not care that she was a woman, did not care about scandal or propriety or the careful lies men told to maintain their power. The mountains simply existed, massive and eternal and true. She envied them, that certainty. A whistle screamed. The train began to slow. Through the window, Clara saw her destination appear like a sketch drawn in charcoal. Redemption, Wyoming. Population 412, according to the outdated guidebook she had purchased in Chicago. A mining town, mostly. Some ranching. A place small enough that a stranger could disappear, yet civilized enough to have need of medical services. A place to hide for 6 months while the scandal cooled. Then Canada. A new name. A new life. The platform was nearly empty when Clara stepped down. Late afternoon had given way to dusk, and the few people waiting for arrivals hurried past without looking at her. good. She adjusted her bonnet, picked up her carpetbag and medical case, and tried to remember how to walk like someone who belonged. The town was exactly what she had expected. False front buildings weathered gray by wind and sun. Dirt streets churned into mud by recent rain. A saloon with painted windows. A general store with farming implements hanging from the porch roof. A church with a crooked steeple. And everywhere the smell of wood smoke and horse manure and something else. Something metallic that she recognized from surgery. Blood, perhaps, or just the scent of hard living. She walked toward the boarding house, her boots sinking slightly in the mud with each step. The weight of her bags made her shoulders ache. When had she last eaten? Kansas City, maybe. A piece of bread so stale it had sat in her stomach like a stone. She should eat. Should find the boarding house, rent a room, compose herself. Instead, she felt the world tilt. The ground rushed up to meet her. Clara's medical bag hit the mud first, then her knees, then her shoulder. The impact drove the air from her lungs. She lay there, cheek pressed against cold earth, and thought with perfect clarity, I am going to die in Wyoming, and no one will know my real name. Footsteps. Heavy. Coming closer. A man's voice rough with disuse. Ma'am, Clara tried to respond. Her mouth would not form words, hands under her shoulders lifting. The world spun again. She found herself being carried, the motion jarring despite the careful way the man walked. She tried to see his face, but her vision had narrowed to a tunnel. Just impressions. Broad shoulders. A scar running from wrist to elbow on his left arm. The smell of horses and coffee. Don't die, the man said. It was not a request. It was a command delivered with the flat authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Clara wanted to laugh, as if death could be ordered away. Darkness took her. She woke to lamplight and the smell of beef broth. Her first thought was that she had been discovered, that the man who carried her had recognized her face from the newspapers, that a marshal was already on his way. Her second thought was that she needed to vomit. She turned her head just in time. Strong hands held her hair back while she retched into a basin. When the spasms passed, those same hands offered a wet cloth. Clara wiped her mouth, her stomach still churning but empty now. When did you last eat? The voice belonged to the man who had carried her. Clara forced herself to focus. He sat in a chair beside the bed, forearms resting on his knees, watching her with an expression that was not quite concerned, more like curious, the way a doctor might observe an unusual symptom. The room was sparse, a rope bed beneath her, a washstand, a single window with a gingham curtain. Not a boarding house, somewhere private. 3 days, Clara said. Her voice came out hoarse. Maybe 4. And before that, I don't remember. The man stood. He was taller than she had realized, with the weathered face of someone who spent his days outdoors. Mid-30s maybe, though hard living made it difficult to tell. Face weathered like old leather. He wore work clothes, faded denim, and a cotton shirt with sweat stains under the arms. His hands were rough with calluses, but clean. She noticed that. Clean hands. He brought her a cup of broth. Clara tried to sit up and nearly fainted again. The man caught her shoulder, steadied her, propped a pillow behind her back with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. Slow, he said. Sips. The broth was hot and salty and the most delicious thing Clara had ever tasted. She forced herself to drink slowly, even though every cell in her body screamed for more. After a few sips, the man took the cup back. That's enough for now. More in an hour. Clara nodded. The room had stopped spinning. She could think again, which meant she could worry again. Where am I? My house. 2 miles north of Redemption. Why, you collapsed in the street. Seemed unkind to leave you there. Clara studied him more carefully. The scar on his arm was old, healed, white, and ropey. A serious injury survived. His hands, despite the calluses, moved with a certain precision. And his eyes. Brown, tired, shadowed underneath. Eyes that had seen too much. You're not from around here, he said. It was not a question. No. Running from something. Clara's fingers tightened on the blanket. What makes you think that? Woman traveling alone. 3rd-class ticket. Medical bag worth more than everything else she owns. No luggage except what she can carry. Starving herself rather than spend money on food. He paused. And you're dressed like a man under that traveling coat. Clara's hand flew to her collar. He was right. In her haste to leave Philadelphia, she had grabbed whatever clothes would help her blend into anonymity. A man's shirt, a waistcoat. She had bound her chest, cut her hair short beneath the bonnet. All of it hidden under the respectable traveling coat, but not hidden well enough. "I'm not going to turn you in," the man said. "Whatever you did or didn't do, that's your business." "Then why bring me here?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, rougher. "I brought you here because I need a doctor." Clara's breath caught. "I'm not a doctor." "Your medical bag says otherwise. Pennsylvania Hospital stamp on the leather, obstetric forceps, surgical instruments cleaned with carbolic acid. I can smell it from here." He met her eyes. "I was a field surgeon, Union Army. I know medical equipment when I see it." The world seemed to contract. Clara could feel her pulse in her throat. If he knew she was a doctor, if he knew about Pennsylvania Hospital, then it was only a matter of time before he connected the rest. Before he asked the wrong questions, and she had to choose between lying and running. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jacob Cole." "What do you want, Mr. Cole?" Jacob walked to the window. Outside, full dark had fallen. 3 men got caught in a rock slide a week ago. Gulch collapsed while they were moving cattle through. One's got broken ribs, maybe lung damage. He's breathing shallow, spitting pink. One's got a leg wound that's going bad. Started clean, but now it's hot, with red streaks climbing toward his hip. One's got a shoulder out of socket, swelled up like a melon turned black. Clara's mind automatically began cataloging injuries. Pneumothorax or pulmonary contusion. Septicemia, anterior shoulder dislocation with possible brachial plexus damage. All serious, all requiring immediate treatment. "The town doctor won't come," Jacob continued. "Says it's too far for what I can pay." "Can't you bring them to town?" "Miguel can't be moved. The rib injury. Tommy's got fever. The trip would kill him. And Pete would rather die than let the town doctor touch him." Jacob turned from the window. "These men stayed with me when my wife was sick. Worked for promises instead of wages. Buried her with me when the doctor said there was nothing to do." His voice cracked on the word wife. Just slightly. But Clara heard it. "She died here," Clara said. It was not a question. 2 years ago, in this room. Clara looked at the bed beneath her with new understanding. The too clean floor, the faint smell of lye soap beneath the beef broth. Jacob had scrubbed this room trying to erase death and failed. "I can't pay you wages," Jacob said. "Ranch is running on credit right now, but you'd have a room, nothing fancy. This room, actually. I sleep in the barn. I'd ride to town for whatever supplies you need. And there are other folks out here who need help. Homesteaders, small ranchers. You could treat them, trade for what you need. So I'd be living on your property alone with you and 3 injured men I've never met. In the middle of nowhere." "Yes, ma'am. That's the situation." Clara should have said no. Should have thanked him for the broth and the rescue and found her way back to town. Should have stuck to her plan. 6 months of hiding, then Canada. Simple. Safe. But she thought about the 3 men dying because they were poor. Thought about the town doctor who would not come. Thought about how she had spent 3 days on a train running from the charge that she cared too little for life, when in truth she cared too much. "If I don't like it," she asked, "I'll bring you back to town by sundown tomorrow. Your choice." Clara closed her eyes, felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her bones. When she opened them again, Jacob was still watching her with those tired, knowing eyes. "I'll need to see them before I decide," she said. Jacob nodded once. "Fair enough. Rest tonight. We'll go to the bunkhouse in the morning." He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Clara lay in the bed where Jacob's wife had died and tried not to think about what that meant. Tried not to notice the faint discoloration on the floorboards near the washstand. Blood, probably. Scrubbed, but not gone. Never truly gone. She slept poorly. When dawn came, it found her already awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to remember why she had ever thought running would be easier than fighting. Jacob brought her breakfast, cornmeal mush and bacon. Coffee so strong it made her teeth ache. They ate in silence at the kitchen table. Clara noticed things she had missed the night before. The house was clean but empty. No photographs, no decorations. just functional furniture, and the pervasive sense of someone trying very hard not to remember. "Your wife," Clara said. "What was her name?" "Sarah." "What did she die from?" Jacob's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. "Fever. It came on fast. By the time I got her to town, the doctor said it was too late." There was something he was not saying. Clara could hear it in the pause before he spoke, in the way his thumb rubbed unconsciously at the scar on his forearm. But she did not push. Everyone had secrets. She better than anyone understood that. After breakfast, they walked to the bunkhouse. The morning air was cold enough to show breath. Clara pulled her coat tighter. Around them, the ranch spread out in various states of disrepair. A barn with a sagging roof, a chicken coop listing to one side, a vegetable garden struggling against the early frost. This was not a prosperous operation. This was survival held together by stubbornness and very little else. The bunkhouse door stuck. Jacob shouldered it open. The smell hit Clara first. Sweat, old and fresh, leather and hay. And underneath that sweet sour rot that made her stomach drop. Infection advanced. 3 men on rope beds, the room dim, with only one small window. Clara's eyes adjusted slowly. The Mexican man pushed up on one elbow when she entered. His face went gray with pain. He sucked air through his teeth and lay back down, fast. His breathing came shallow and careful. Broken ribs, definitely, maybe worse. The young one thrashed under a thin blanket, head turning side to side. Fever sweat soaked his hair dark. His eyes opened unfocused and bright with delirium. He said something, words that made no sense. Then his eyes rolled back. The old man sat upright on the third bed, back against the wall. His left shoulder bulged wrong, swollen huge, the joint lumpy and purple-black under his shirt. The fabric would not close over it. He watched Clara with narrowed, suspicious eyes. "You're the nurse," he said. His voice rasped like sandpaper. "I'm a doctor," Clara corrected. The words were out before she could stop them. Stupid. Dangerous. But the old man just snorted. "Don't care what you call yourself, you any good? You'll know soon enough." Clara set her medical bag on the nearest trunk, opened it. The instruments inside caught the dim morning light. Forceps, scalpels, needles, surgical silk, her mother's tools. Her tools now. She looked at the 3 men, at Jacob standing in the doorway, watching her with an expression she could not read, at the choice spreading out before her like a map of unmapped territory. She could walk away, should walk away. These men were not her responsibility. She owed them nothing. She was a fugitive with her own survival to worry about. But that was the thing about being a doctor. It was not something you did, it was something you were. And Clara was a doctor down to her bones, down to the cellular level, down to the place where identity lived deeper than fear. "I need boiling water," she said, "lots of it. Clean cloths, sheets, towels, anything cotton, soap, more lamps, and whiskey." Jacob disappeared. Clara rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The young one, Tommy, went first. She peeled away the bandage on his leg. The wound ran from knee to ankle, jagged and deep. Pus thick as cream filled it. Red streaks climbed from the wound toward his groin. Blood poisoning. Advancing fast. Another day and it would reach his organs. 2 days and he would be dead. Jacob returned with supplies. Steam rising from a pot. Armfuls of cloth. A bottle of whiskey. "Hold him," Clara said. Jacob moved to the head of the bed. Put his hands on Tommy's shoulders. Clara poured carbolic acid directly into the wound. Tommy's back arched. He screamed high and thin. His heels drummed against the bed frame. The ropes creaked. Jacob held him down. The carbolic fizzed in the infected tissue. Clara used the forceps to pull away dead flesh, gray and soft, coming apart under the metal. Tommy passed out. His body went slack. Better. She flushed the wound with boiled water. Once, twice, 3 times. The water ran pink, then red, then pink again. She packed the wound with gauze soaked in diluted carbolic, wrapped it snug but not tight, elevated his leg on a folded blanket. Her hands cramped. Her lower back screamed. She ignored both. Miguel watched from his bed, his breathing careful and shallow. "Let me see," Clara said. He pulled his shirt up slowly. His torso was wrapped in dirty cloth, an attempted binding. Clara unwrapped it. His ribs showed purple-black bruises, swelling on the left side. When she pressed gentle fingers there, he hissed. 2 broken, maybe 3. She could feel the displacement under his skin, bones not quite aligned. She wrapped his ribs with clean strips of sheet, tight enough to stabilize. Not so tight he could not breathe. When she finished, he could take deeper breaths. Pete watched everything. His jaw worked. "You're next," Clara said. "Don't need a woman poking at me. Then you'll lose use of that arm. Your choice." He muttered under his breath, did not refuse. Clara examined the shoulder without touching. The joint had been out for a week. The capsule would be swollen tight. Nerve damage possible. Reduction would hurt, a lot. "This is going to be bad," she said. "I can give you laudanum. Save it for the kid. The kid's unconscious. You're not." Pete's mouth set in a hard line. "No laudanum." Clara looked at Jacob. "Hold him. Don't let him move." Jacob positioned himself behind Pete, arms wrapped around the old man's chest, pinning him to the bed frame. Clara grasped Pete's wrist and elbow, pulled steady traction. The shoulder resisted, swollen tissue holding the joint out of place. She pulled harder. Pete's face went white. Sweat beaded on his forehead. She rotated the arm external, felt for the socket with her other hand. The humeral head was displaced anterior and inferior. She pushed, pulled, rotated. Pete screamed. Out. The joint popped back into place with a sound like a branch breaking. Pete went limp. Jacob released him. The old man's breathing came in gasps. Clara bound the shoulder tight to his body. "Don't lift anything for 2 weeks. Don't raise this arm above your head for a month." 2 weeks? Pete's voice was weak. "I got work. Then you'll destroy the joint and never lift anything again." He did not argue more. Clara stood. Her back ached. Her hands trembled. The first tremor she had allowed since entering the bunkhouse. The lamplight wavered. Outside a rooster crowed. Morning fully arrived. Jacob stood near the door. "They going to make it? Ask me in 10 days." She walked out into the cold morning air. The sun had broken the horizon, orange light spilling across the prairie, turning the grass gold. The peaks caught the last light, going from gold to rose to deep blue. Clara's hands were still shaking. She clasped them together, forced them still. Behind her, Jacob emerged from the bunkhouse. They stood together in the yard, not speaking. The silence was not uncomfortable, just empty, waiting to be filled. "I'll stay," Clara said. 3 months, then I'm leaving." "Where will you go?" "Canada, maybe." Jacob nodded. "Fair enough." He did not ask why Canada, did not ask what she was running from, and Clara, exhausted down to her bones, was grateful for that small mercy. They walked back to the house. Jacob showed her where things were kept: the cold cellar, the chicken coop, the well, the privy out back. All of it functional but worn. A place held together by necessity rather than care. "Your room," Jacob said, opening the door. The room where Sarah had died. Clara stepped inside, looked at the rope bed, the washstand, the window facing east. Morning light streamed through the gingham curtain, turning everything gold. On the floor near the washstand, she saw it again. The faint discoloration, blood that had soaked into the wood grain, scrubbed but permanent. "I'll leave you to settle in," Jacob said. He closed the door. Clara sat on the bed. The ropes sagged under her weight. She looked at the bloodstain and thought about the woman who had died here. Sarah Cole, Jacob's wife. A woman who had lived and loved and died in this sparse little room, while the man who loved her watched helpless. Had Sarah been running from something too, or had she chosen this life deliberately? Had she been happy here, or had she spent her days dreaming of somewhere else? Clara would never know. The dead kept their secrets. She lay back on the bed, closed her eyes, and for the first time in 3 days, she allowed herself to think clearly about what she had done, about the choice she had made when she stepped on that train, about the life she had left behind. Dr. Marcus Webb had won. He had her position now, her operating theater, her patients. He had probably already begun spreading the story of the criminal lady doctor who fled justice. By now, all of Philadelphia knew, all of Pennsylvania, perhaps all of the eastern states. Clara Margaret Ashford, surgeon, criminal, fugitive. The words still tasted like copper, but lying here in this small room with bloodstains on the floor watching dust motes dance in the morning light, Clara felt something unexpected. Not peace exactly, but a kind of clarity. She had run, yes, but she had also chosen. And there was power in that choice, even if it looked like cowardice from the outside. She had chosen to save herself, to preserve her ability to heal, to refuse a world that would rather see her destroyed than powerful. And now, in this impossible place, she had chosen again, to stay, to treat men who could not afford doctors, to practice medicine in a barn and a bunkhouse instead of a proper hospital. It was not the life she had planned, but perhaps Clara thought the lives we plan are often smaller than the lives we need. She slept. When she woke, the sun had moved across the sky. Late afternoon, she had slept for hours. Her body felt heavy, her mind clearer. A knock at the door. "Come in," Clara said. Jacob entered. He carried a plate, bread and cheese, a tin cup of water. "Thought you might be hungry." Clara sat up, took the plate. The bread was fresh, the cheese sharp. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. "The men are resting," Jacob said. "Tommy's fever broke, Miguel's breathing easier, Pete's sleeping." "Good." Jacob hesitated at the door. "I should tell you something." Clara looked up. His expression had changed, guarded now, careful. "The town doctor, his name is Theodore Hartwell. He'll hear about you, probably soon. He doesn't like competition. Is he good?" "He's competent, but he only treats people who can pay, and he asks a lot of questions." A warning. Clara understood. "I'll be careful." Jacob nodded. "There's one more thing. Sarah, my wife." He stopped. Started again. "She didn't just die from fever. It was complicated. And I don't talk about it, but you're sleeping in her room. Seemed only fair to tell you that much." Clara waited, but Jacob did not elaborate. He just stood there, turning his hat brim in his hands, looking like a man carrying weight he could not set down. "Thank you for telling me," Clara said. He left. Clara finished eating. Then she unpacked her carpet bag. 3 dresses, undergarments, her mother's Bible, the medical textbooks she had saved money to buy, and at the bottom, wrapped in brown paper, the Philadelphia Inquirer. She pulled it out, unfolded it, read the headline again. "Female surgeon faces criminal charges in Vanderbilt scandal. Dr. Clara Margaret Ashford, chief resident at Pennsylvania Hospital, has been accused of performing an illegal abortion on Mrs. Eleanor Vanderbilt, wife of shipping magnate Theodore Vanderbilt. Hospital administrators confirmed that Dr. Ashford performed surgery on Mrs. Vanderbilt 3 weeks ago, though the exact nature of the procedure remains in dispute. Dr. Marcus Webb, attending physician, provided sworn testimony that the surgery was conducted without proper authorization and resulted in the termination of Mrs. Vanderbilt's pregnancy. Dr. Webb states that he attempted to intervene, but was prevented by Dr. Ashford, who he describes as aggressive and unwilling to accept medical guidance. Mrs. Vanderbilt could not be reached for comment. Her husband released a statement expressing his family's distress and calling for a full investigation. If convicted, Dr. Ashford faces up to 15 years in prison. She is currently believed to be at large. Clara folded the newspaper, walked to the small stove in the corner of the room, struck a match, watched the paper catch, curl, blacken, turn to ash. The lies burned easily. The truth was harder to destroy. She had saved Eleanor Vanderbilt's life. The ectopic pregnancy would have ruptured, would have killed her. Clara had performed emergency surgery, removed the damaged fallopian tube, stopped the internal bleeding. It was textbook medicine. Perfect technique. A life saved. But Marcus Webb had wanted her position, had wanted her gone. And in a world where women were not supposed to wield scalpels, it was easy to twist salvation into sin. So he had lied, and the world had believed him. And now Clara was here, in Wyoming, in a dead woman's room, treating men in a bunkhouse for trade instead of money. It was not fair, it was not just. But it was real, and real was all she had left. That night Clara lay awake, listening to the house settle. Jacob's footsteps in the barn, the wind through the eaves, the distant howl of something wild, and beneath it all a question that would not let her sleep. What had really killed Sarah Cole? And why did Jacob look like a man haunted by more than grief when he spoke her name? The blood stain on the floor offered no answers. But Clara, doctor, and fugitive both knew that blood always told a story. She just had to learn how to read it. 3 weeks passed like water through fingers. Clara fell into a rhythm she had not known she was capable of. Up before dawn to check on the men. Miguel's ribs knitting slow but steady. Tommy's leg healing clean, new pink skin growing over the wound. Pete's shoulder mobile again, though he complained about everything with a vigor that suggested health rather than illness. Mornings meant feeding the chickens, vicious little creatures that pecked at her boots and flew at her face when she scattered grain. Clara had never been afraid of surgery, but chickens terrified her in a way she could not explain. Something about their beady eyes and unpredictable movements. Afternoons meant the garden, pulling weeds from between the tomato plants, picking the last of the beans before the frost killed them, watering the squash that persisted despite the cold. Dirt got under her fingernails and stayed there. She stopped trying to scrub it out. Started to like it there, actually. Evidence of work, of usefulness. Evenings meant sitting on the porch with Jacob, 2 tin cups of coffee. Mountain shadows stretched long across the valley floor. Silence that was not awkward, just companionable. Sometimes they talked. Mostly they did not. Clara found she preferred it that way. Words required careful curation. Silence could just be. She had not thought about Philadelphia in days, had not checked the mail coach for newspapers bearing her name, had not looked over her shoulder expecting marshals. Wyoming was teaching her a different kind of fear. The fear of winter coming without enough firewood. The fear of the well running dry. The fear of a patient dying because the nearest proper hospital was 2 days' ride away. These fears were cleaner somehow, more honest. She was thinking about the strange honesty of survival when the boy appeared. It was late afternoon. Clara was in the garden on her knees in the dirt, wrestling with a particularly stubborn weed. The boy came running across the prairie, stumbling over sagebrush, his face streaked with tears and dust. "Help!" The word came out broken. "Please, someone help." Clara stood. Her knees protested. She ignored them. "What happened?" "My brother. Snake bit him. He's dying. Please." The boy was maybe 10, dressed in clothes too big for his thin frame. His hands shook when he pointed back the way he had come. "What's your name?" Clara asked. Matthew Henderson. My brother's hurt bad." Jacob emerged from the barn, took one look at the boy and moved, fast, efficient, a man who understood emergency. "Where?" Jacob asked. "Creek bed, half-mile west." "Show me." They ran. Clara grabbed her medical bag and followed. Her skirts tangled around her legs. She hiked them up, not caring about propriety. The boy led them through tall grass, over rocks, down into a shallow creek bed where water trickled between stones. A child lay there, younger than Matthew, maybe 7. The resemblance was clear. Same dark hair, same thin build. His leg was swollen to twice its normal size. Purple-black spreading from the bite marks on his ankle. His breathing came fast and shallow. His eyes rolled back, showing whites. Rattlesnake. Had to be. This close to the mountains, they were common. Clara knelt beside the child, felt for a pulse, thready, racing. The venom was spreading fast, too fast. "How long ago?" she asked. "Maybe an hour. We were looking for our cow. She wandered off and—" "It's all right," Clara said. Not true, but necessary. She opened her medical bag. Scalpel. Carbolic acid. Tourniquet. She would have to cut, make an incision around the bite, try to draw out the venom, then cauterize with carbolic. It was crude medicine, battlefield medicine, but it was all she had. Her hands moved to tie the tourniquet above the bite, to stop the venom from spreading further. "Don't," Jacob's voice, sharp, commanding. Clara looked up. He was staring at the child's leg with an intensity that made the air feel thin. "We need to stop the spread," Clara said. "The tourniquet will cut off blood flow. You'll lose the leg even if you save the boy. Better to lose a leg than a life. There's another way." Jacob knelt beside her, pulled a knife from his belt. Not a scalpel, a hunting knife. He held it over the fire. The older boy had started heating the blade until it glowed faint red. Clara watched, silent. Her instinct screamed that this was wrong, that she should stop him, but something in Jacob's movements held her still. This was not improvisation. This was training. Jacob made 4 quick incisions around the bite. Precise cuts, shallow, just deep enough to open the tissue. Blood welled. He pressed down hard, squeezing. Dark blood mixed with something yellowish oozed out. Venom. Then he did something Clara had never seen. He positioned the child's leg at an angle, elevated, and he began to massage, not roughly, with calculated pressure, working from the bite upward, pushing fluid away from the wound, draining it. Suction, he said. Clara understood. She found a small glass bottle in her bag, heated it over the fire, pressed it against one of the incisions. The vacuum pulled, drew out more of the poisoned blood. They worked together. Incision, suction, massage, over and over. The child whimpered, but did not wake. Probably better that way. After 20 minutes, the fluid coming out ran clearer. Red blood instead of yellow tinged. Jacob sat back on his heels. Now carbolic, he said. Clara poured it over the wounds, bandaged them. The child's breathing had slowed. Not normal, but steadier. The purple spread had stopped climbing. We need to get him somewhere warm, Jacob said. Watch him through the night. Make sure there's no delayed reaction. They carried the child back to the ranch. Matthew followed, silent with shock. Clara made a pallet in the main room of the house, near the stove. She built up the fire until heat radiated through the space. The child slept. Fitful, but slept. Jacob stood at the window, looking out at nothing. His hands were shaking. Clara noticed that, the tremor he was trying to hide. "Where did you learn that technique?" she asked. Jacob did not turn around. Pennsylvania Hospital, 1872 to 1875, surgical residency under Dr. Samuel Gross. The name hit Clara like a fist to the stomach. Samuel Gross, the most famous surgeon in America, the man who wrote the textbook every medical student studied, the man who never took female students. "You were his resident," Clara said. It was not a question. One of them. "Then why are you here? Why are you ranching in Wyoming instead of practicing surgery in Philadelphia?" Jacob turned. His face was carefully blank, but his eyes held something raw. "Same reason you are, I expect. Running from something I can't fix." The child stirred, moaned. Clara went to him, checked his pulse, checked the bandages. The swelling had gone down slightly. Still dangerous, still touch and go, but better. "He'll live," she said, "because of you, because of us." Jacob nodded. "I'll take first watch. You should sleep." But Clara did not sleep. She sat in her room in the chair by the window and thought about what she had just learned. Jacob Cole was not a rancher pretending to know medicine. He was a trained surgeon hiding in ranch clothes, which meant he was running from something too. Something big enough to make him abandon everything he had worked for, just like her. The child survived the night. By morning he was conscious, asking for water. The fever had broken. Clara changed the bandages. The wounds looked clean, pink, and healing. Matthew Henderson cried when Clara told him his brother would be fine. Cried hard, shaking sobs of relief. "We don't have money," Matthew said when he could speak again. "But Pa has a cow. I can bring her. Or chickens. We got chickens." "Bring the cow," Jacob said. "And tell your father if he needs any ranch work done, I'm hiring." The Henderson boys left. Clara and Jacob stood on the porch watching them go. The sun was climbing. Another clear day. The kind of beautiful that made you forget winter was coming. "You don't need more hands," Clara said. "No, but their father needs work. So you'll create a job. It's not charity if he earns it." Clara looked at Jacob, really looked. Saw the man beneath the weathered exterior, saw the surgeon who had walked away from prestige and power to bury his wife in Wyoming dirt. Saw the goodness he tried to hide behind gruffness. "Who are you, Jacob Cole?" she asked. He smiled. "Not quite. I'm still trying to figure that out." The cow arrived 3 days later, along with Dr. Theodore Hartwell. Clara was in the garden when she heard the wagon. She looked up, shading her eyes against the sun. 2 horses. One pulling a wagon with a cow tied in back, the other carrying a man in a black suit. The man dismounted with practiced ease. Tall, handsome in a sharp-featured way, maybe 42. He carried a medical bag. Expensive leather, well-maintained. "You must be the new nurse everyone's talking about," he said. His voice was smooth, cultured. Eastern accent barely softened by Western living. Clara stood, brushed dirt from her skirt. "I'm Clara Brennan, Dr. Theodore Hartwell." He offered his hand. His grip was firm, his hand soft, not a man who did much manual labor. "The town doctor," Clara said. "The only doctor until recently." His smile did not quite reach his eyes. "I heard about the Henderson boy, the snakebite case. Impressive work. Rattlesnake venom is tricky. Most frontier practitioners would have just amputated. We were fortunate. Fortunate and skilled." Hartwell's gaze moved over her, assessing. "Where did you train Miss Brennan?" The question came casual, but Clara heard the trap in it. "I assisted in a hospital back east, learned by watching." "Which hospital?" "A small one. You wouldn't know it." Hartwell's smile widened. "Try me. I'm quite familiar with Eastern medical institutions." Before Clara could answer, Jacob appeared. He walked with deliberate slowness, the kind of slow that looked lazy but was actually calculated, putting himself between Clara and Hartwell. "Doctor," Jacob said, not friendly, just acknowledging. "Mr. Cole, I heard you had medical help now. Thought I'd come introduce myself, offer my services if needed." "We're managing." "So I hear." Hartwell turned back to Clara. "I run a small practice in Redemption, nothing fancy, but I could use an assistant, someone with training. The pay would be modest, but regular. Better than bartering for chickens." Clara felt Jacob tense beside her, felt the air pressure change. "That's generous," she said carefully, "but I'm committed here for the time being. The offer stands. Should you change your mind." Hartwell produced a card from his vest pocket. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. "I'm always looking for skilled help, especially someone with your background." The pause before background lasted half a second too long. Clara's mouth went dry. "I'll keep that in mind," she said. Hartwell tipped his hat, mounted his horse, rode away at an easy pace. A man with nowhere urgent to be. When he was out of sight, Jacob spoke. "He knows something." "Maybe." "Definitely." Jacob turned to look at her. "Be careful around him. Hartwell's been the only doctor for 50 miles for 10 years. He doesn't like competition. And he's got connections in Denver. Telegraph access." Telegraph access. Which meant he could send inquiries, could check her story, could find out who Clara Brennan really was. Clara's hands shook. She clasped them together. "I should leave, before he causes trouble." "Where would you go?" "I don't know. Canada, Mexico, somewhere." Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "Or you could stay, and we face whatever comes together." "Together." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "Why would you do that?" Clara asked. "Because I know what it's like to run, and I know it doesn't fix anything. Eventually, you have to stop running and deal with what's chasing you." "What if what's chasing me is worse than you think? Then we'll handle it when it gets here." Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that someone would stand with her instead of running, but trust was a luxury she could not afford. "I need to think about it," she said. Jacob nodded. "Fair enough." He walked back to the barn. Clara stood alone in the garden, looking at the mountains, at the sky, at the vast empty space of Wyoming spreading out in all directions. She had thought this place would be a hiding spot, a temporary shelter until the storm passed. But storms do not pass, they just move. And this one was catching up. 2 days later, Hartwell sent a messenger, a young man on a tired horse. He carried a letter for Clara. She opened it in the privacy of her room. The handwriting was perfect, practiced, the kind of penmanship that came from expensive education. "Miss Brennan, I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to follow up on our conversation regarding employment. As I mentioned, I could greatly benefit from an assistant with your level of skill. I should mention that I've recently received several inquiries from colleagues back east. They're quite interested in tracking down a certain lady physician who disappeared under unfortunate circumstances. Apparently, there's some question about her whereabouts." I assured them I knew nothing of the matter. Redemption is a long way from Philadelphia, after all, different worlds entirely. However, I would welcome the opportunity to discuss this further in person. Perhaps over tea I have some medical cases that could benefit from a second opinion, and several forms that require a physician's signature. Routine matters. Nothing concerning. I await your reply. Yours in medicine. Dr. Theodore Hartwell. Clara read the letter 3 times. Each time her hands shook more. It was blackmail, polite, wrapped in professional courtesy, but blackmail nonetheless. He knew who she was, or suspected strongly enough that he was willing to gamble, and he was giving her a choice: work for him, or face exposure. She should have burned the letter, should have packed her bag and left that night. Instead, she wrote back, "Dr. Hartwell, I would be happy to discuss potential collaboration. I can visit your office tomorrow afternoon. Regards, C. Brennan." She sent the reply with the messenger. Then she sat on her bed and tried to think, tried to plan, tried to find a way out that did not exist. Jacob found her there an hour later. She had not moved. "What happened?" he asked. Clara handed him the letter, watched his face as he read, watched the muscle in his jaw tighten. "Son of a bitch," Jacob said quietly. "I'll go see what he wants. Maybe I can reason with him." "He doesn't want reason. He wants leverage." "Then what do you suggest?" Jacob sat beside her on the bed. The ropes creaked. "Tell me the truth, all of it. What are you really running from?" Clara closed her eyes, felt the weight of the secret pressing down. She had carried it alone for so long. The idea of sharing it felt both terrifying and necessary. "I'm a surgeon," she said. "Was a surgeon. Dr. Clara Margaret Ashford, Pennsylvania Hospital. I was accused of performing an illegal abortion on a wealthy woman. The charge is false. I saved her life, but my rival, he fabricated evidence, bought witnesses, made it look like I committed a crime." She opened her eyes, looked at Jacob. "If I go back, I'll go to prison. 15 years, maybe more. And even if I could prove my innocence, the scandal would destroy me. No hospital would hire a woman who'd been accused. I'd never practice medicine again." Jacob listened. His expression did not change. "So you ran," he said. "So I ran. And now Hartwell's going to use that." "Yes." They sat in silence. Outside the chickens fussed. A horse whinnied. Normal sounds. Life continuing regardless of human drama. "I'll go with you tomorrow," Jacob said finally. "To meet Hartwell. That might make it worse. Or it might make it clear that you're not alone. That threatening you means going through me, too." Clara looked at him. At this man who was offering to stand between her and danger. This man she had known for less than a month. This man who had secrets of his own. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Jacob was quiet. Then he said, "Because Sarah died alone, scared and alone. And I wasn't able to stop it. I won't watch someone else go through that if I can help." Something in his voice made Clara's chest tighten. Not pity. Something else. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "Thank you," she said. They rode to Redemption the next afternoon. The day was cold. Gray clouds low and heavy, promising snow that had not yet fallen. Hartwell's office was above the general store. Neat, well appointed. Medical texts lined one wall, an examination table, glass cabinets with instruments and medicines, all very proper, very professional. Hartwell greeted them with a smile that looked genuine and was not. "Miss Brennan, Mr. Cole, please sit." They sat. Clara's hands folded in her lap, Jacob beside her, a united front. "Thank you for coming," Hartwell said. "I'll be direct. I need help managing my practice. The territory is growing. More patients than I can handle alone. I need someone with surgical training to assist." "You mentioned signatures," Clara said. "Yes, prescriptions mainly. Laudanum, morphine, the medications that require a physician's authorization. You want me to co-sign your prescriptions. I want you to review them, provide a second opinion, standard practice in larger hospitals." Clara watched his face. Saw nothing but professional courtesy, but her instincts screamed wrong. "How many prescriptions are we discussing?" she asked. "Oh, perhaps 20 to 30 per week. Nothing excessive. 20 to 30 prescriptions for narcotics per week in a town of 400 people. Either Redemption had a significant pain management problem or something else was happening." "I'd need to see your patient files," Clara said. "Review the cases before signing anything." Hartwell's smile tightened, just slightly. "Of course, though I should mention that discretion is important. Some of my patients value their privacy." "All patients deserve privacy." "Indeed." Hartwell stood, walked to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. "I took the liberty of preparing some initial paperwork, just routine forms. If you could sign here, And here." He laid the papers in front of Clara. She read them carefully. They were prescription authorizations for laudanum, substantial quantities, made out to various names she did not recognize. "I'll need time to consider this," Clara said. "Of course, though I should mention that my Eastern colleagues are quite persistent. They send regular inquiries. I've been able to deflect them so far, but if I don't have good news to share, well, I can't promise to keep deflecting." There it was, the threat made explicit. Jacob leaned forward. "That sounds like blackmail, Doctor." Hartwell's expression did not change. "I prefer to think of it as professional collaboration. Miss Brennan has skills I need. I have information she'd prefer remained confidential. Mutually beneficial arrangement." "And if she refuses?" Jacob asked. "Then I suppose I'll have to be honest with my colleagues. Tell them that, yes, I believe I may have encountered the missing Dr. Ashford, the one wanted for criminal activity in Philadelphia. I'm sure the marshal would be interested in that information." Clara felt the walls closing in, felt the trap she had walked into. She could sign these papers, become complicit in whatever Hartwell was doing, or she could refuse and face arrest, prison, the end of everything. "I need 24 hours, she said. Hartwell smiled. "Of course, though I do need an answer soon. My patients are waiting." They left, rode back to the ranch in silence. The gray clouds finally opened. Snow began to fall, light at first, then heavier, coating the prairie in white. Inside the house, Jacob built up the fire. Clara sat at the table, staring at nothing. "What are you going to do?" Jacob asked. "I don't know." "You could sign, buy yourself time. And become part of whatever he's doing. He's not prescribing that much laudanum for legitimate medical purposes. Probably selling it. There's a market for narcotics, saloons, gambling houses, mining camps, which makes me complicit. Makes me exactly what Marcus Webb accused me of being, a criminal." Jacob poured coffee, set a cup in front of her. "Or you could refuse, and we deal with the consequences together. The consequence is prison. Maybe, or maybe we find another way." Clara wrapped her hands around the cup. The heat burned, but she did not let go. "There is no other way. He has me trapped." They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Outside, snow continued falling, erasing the world in white. Near midnight, she heard footsteps. Quiet. Near midnight, she heard footsteps. Quiet, careful. Then a knock. "Clara," Jacob's voice, soft. "Come in." He opened the door, stood in the threshold. Lamplight from the main room behind him. "Can't sleep either," he said. "No." "There's a patient out in the bunkhouse, old Pete. He's having nightmares, thrashing. I'm worried he'll hurt his shoulder again." Clara rose, pulled on her robe, followed Jacob through the cold house. In the bunkhouse, Pete lay in his bed, eyes closed but moving beneath the lids, his body tense, his good hand clenched in the blanket. "War dreams," Jacob said quietly. "He gets them sometimes." Clara sat beside the bed, laid her hand on Pete's forehead, not checking temperature, just grounding. Presence. "Pete," she said softly, "you're safe. You're in the bunkhouse. It's 1885. The war is over." Pete's eyes opened, unfocused, seeing something that was not there. "They're coming," he whispered. "They're coming through the trees." "No one's coming. You're safe." Clara kept her hand on his forehead, kept speaking, soft and steady. Gradually, Pete's breathing slowed, his body relaxed, his eyes focused. "Doc," he said, "I'm here. Thought I was back there at Gettysburg." "You're not. You're here, in Wyoming. 20 years later?" Pete nodded, closed his eyes. This time sleep came naturally. Clara stood. Jacob was watching her, something in his expression she could not name. They walked outside. The snow had stopped. The world lay silent and white under a full moon, so bright it hurt to look at. "You're good at that," Jacob said. "At what? Bringing people back, from wherever they go in their heads." Clara shrugged. "I just tell them the truth, where they are, when it is. Sometimes that's enough." They walked to the fence line, looked out at the snow-covered prairie. Snow on the distant peaks glowed pink in the fading moon. "Can I ask you something?" Jacob said. "Yes." "Have you ever killed someone?" The question hung in the cold air. Clara thought about lying, about deflecting, but there was something in the moment. The moonlight, the silence. the strange intimacy of two people standing in the middle of nowhere, asking impossible questions. "Yes," she said, not intentionally. "But yes," Jacob nodded. "Tell me." So Clara told him about the woman who died in childbirth, about how she had misjudged the bleeding, about how by the time she understood what was happening, it was too late, about how she still saw that woman's face sometimes, still heard her last words. "I'm tired. I'm so tired." "I tried," Clara said. Her voice broke. "I tried everything. But she died anyway. And her baby with her." "Did you make a mistake?" Jacob asked. "I don't know. I've replayed it 1,000 times. Maybe if I'd acted sooner, maybe if I'd called for help faster, maybe. Or maybe she was going to die regardless, and you did everything a human could do." Clara looked at him, saw understanding in his face, the kind that came from experience. "Your turn," she said. "Who did you kill?" Jacob was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said, "In the war. Too many to count. But that was war. That was expected." He stopped, breathed. After the war, I killed 2 men, not in battle, in surgery. Patients, soldiers, Union, injured in a training accident after the war ended. I was arrogant, thought I could save them both, operated on one while the other waited, but I took too long, used a new technique I'd read about, experimental. By the time I finished with the first, the second had bled out. His voice was flat, factual, but Clara heard the pain beneath. "Could anyone have saved him?" she asked. "A better surgeon might have. Or a different surgeon might have lost them both." Jacob looked at her. "You trying to make me feel better? I'm trying to tell you what you just told me, that sometimes we do everything right and people die anyway. And we carry it. Because we're human. Because we care. But carrying it doesn't mean we were wrong." They stood in the moonlight, 2 damaged people trading confessions. And for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, Clara felt something shift. Not quite peace, but something close to it. Understanding maybe, or just the relief of not being alone. "I should get back," Clara said finally. "It's late." But she did not move, and neither did Jacob. They just stood there, breathing the cold air, watching the moon paint shadows on the snow. "Clara," Jacob said, his voice rough. "Whatever you decide about Hartwell, whatever happens, you're not alone in this." "I know." "Do you?" She looked at him, really looked. Saw a man who had lost everything and somehow kept standing, saw strength that was not loud or obvious, but was there nonetheless, bedrock deep. "Yes," she said, "I do." They walked back to the house together. At the door to her room, Jacob hesitated. "Thank you," he said. "For what? For telling me the truth. About the woman. About everything." "Thank you for asking." He nodded, turned to leave, then stopped, turned back. "Sarah," he said. "My wife, she didn't die from fever." Clara waited. "The night she died." He stopped. His jaw worked. "I tried to save her, did everything I knew how to do, everything I'd learned in medical school, everything I'd practiced in the war, and it wasn't enough." His voice cracked on the last word. "She died anyway. Right there on that floor. And I've spent 2 years believing that if I'd been better, faster, smarter, she'd still be alive." Clara's chest tightened. "Jacob, I know it's not rational. I know doctors lose patients. But she wasn't a patient, she was Sarah, and I failed her." He turned away, his shoulders rigid with control. Clara wanted to say something, to offer comfort. But what words existed for that kind of grief? "I'm sorry," she said finally. "Inadequate, but true." "So am I." They stood in silence, the whiskey warming Clara's throat, the moonlight painting everything silver and strange. "Whatever you decide about Philadelphia," Jacob said quietly, "whatever happens with Hartwell, I want you to know that having you here, working with you, it's meant something." Clara looked at him, at this man who carried his dead wife's memory like a second spine, who had offered her sanctuary when she needed it most, who was becoming something she did not have words for yet. "It's meant something to me too," she said. Jacob nodded, set down his cup. "I should let you sleep." He left. Clara stood alone at the window, looking at the bloodstain on her floor, at the place where Sarah Cole had died, and she wondered what really happened that night, what Jacob was not saying, what truth lived in the spaces between his words. Because doctors did not usually blame themselves this much for losing patients. Not unless there was more to the story. Not unless they believed they had done something unforgivable. She lay in bed and made a decision. It was not a good decision, not a safe one, but it was hers. Tomorrow she would go back to Hartwell's office, and she would find out exactly what he was doing, how many people he was hurting, how deep the corruption ran, and then somehow she would find a way to stop him, even if it meant exposing herself in the process, even if it meant losing everything, because some things were worth losing everything for. And the truth Clara was learning was one of them. Clara woke before dawn with her decisions solid as stone. She would go to Hartwell's office. She would refuse to sign his prescriptions, and she would face whatever came after. It was not bravery, it was exhaustion. She was tired of running, tired of fear, tired of being someone other than who she was. Dr. Clara Margaret Ashford, surgeon, not criminal, not fugitive, just a doctor trying to do right. She dressed carefully, her best dress, the one she had saved for emergencies, dark blue wool, proper, professional. She pinned her hair up, no bonnet, no disguise. If she was going to do this, she would do it as herself. Jacob was already up when she emerged. He stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the sun break over the mountains. "You're going," he said. "Not a question." "Yes." "To refuse him?" "Yes." Jacob turned, looked at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Pride, maybe, or fear. "Then I'm coming with you." "You don't have to. I know." They rode to redemption in silence. The morning was cold and clear. Frost glittered on the grass like scattered diamonds. The mountain stood sharp against a sky so blue it hurt. Clara memorized it, just in case. Just in case this was the last time she saw Wyoming as a free woman. Redemption was quiet, too quiet. The general store was closed despite the hour. The saloon doors were locked. The street empty except for a single wagon parked outside Hartwell's office. An expensive wagon, polished wood, brass fittings, completely out of place in this rough mining town. Jacob's hand moved to his hip, where a gun would have been if he wore one. "Something's wrong," he said. They dismounted. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed to turn around, to ride back to the ranch, to run. Instead, she walked up the stairs to Hartwell's office, Jacob behind her, a presence, a wall between her and whatever waited. The door was unlocked. Clara pushed it open. Hartwell sat at his desk, calm, composed, smiling. And across from him, in a chair by the window, sat a woman Clara had not seen in months. A woman who should have been in Philadelphia, a woman whose face had haunted Clara's nightmares since the scandal broke. Eleanor Vanderbilt. Clara froze. The room tilted. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel. Eleanor stood. She was thinner than Clara remembered, paler, but her eyes were clear, steady. She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and did something Clara had not expected. She embraced her. "Dr. Ashford," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank God I found you." Clara stood rigid, could not move, could not speak. Behind her she heard Jacob shift, confused, alert. "Mrs. Vanderbilt," Clara managed finally. "I don't understand." Eleanor released her, stepped back. Her hands were shaking. "I've been looking for you for weeks, ever since I learned what Marcus Webb did, what he accused you of." "You came to turn me in?" "No." Eleanor's voice was fierce. "I came to save you." She turned to Hartwell. "Thank you, Doctor, for sending word. The telegraph was most helpful." Hartwell inclined his head, still smiling, watching Clara like she was a particularly interesting specimen under glass. Eleanor reached into her bag, pulled out a folder, heavy paper, official-looking. "These are affidavits, sworn statements from 3 other surgeons who reviewed my case. They all confirm that what you did was emergency medicine, life-saving, not criminal abortion." She pulled out more papers. "This is a letter from the hospital administrator acknowledging that Dr. Webb fabricated evidence, that he bribed witnesses, that the charges against you were entirely false." More papers. "This is a statement from my husband's lawyer, withdrawing any complaint, confirming that our family has no interest in pressing charges." Clara stared at the documents, at the proof of her innocence laid out like offerings. Her hands shook. "I don't understand. Why would you do this?" Eleanor's eyes filled. "Because you saved my life. Not just from the ectopic pregnancy, from my marriage, from a life that was killing me slowly. When you told me I could not have more children, when you explained what the pregnancy would have done to me, you gave me permission to leave him, to choose myself." A tear slipped down her cheek. "My husband was not a kind man, Dr. Ashford. He wanted an heir, wanted me pregnant constantly, despite the risks. And when I lost the baby, when you saved me but could not save the pregnancy, he was furious. But I was free." She wiped her eyes. "I've left him, filed for separation, used my own money to hire investigators, to find the truth, to clear your name." Clara took the folder, opened it. "Read the first page, then the second. Legal language, medical terminology. But the meaning was clear. She was innocent. Officially. Legally. Completely." "There's more," Eleanor said. She pulled out a final document. "The Women's Medical Society of Philadelphia is opening a new hospital, dedicated entirely to women's health. They want you as chief of surgery. Full autonomy, a salary that would make you independent. The chance to practice medicine without prejudice, without limitation." She held out the document. An employment contract, Clara's name already written in elegant script. "You can come home," Eleanor said softly. "You can have everything you worked for, everything you deserve." The room was silent. Clara could hear her own heartbeat, could hear Jacob breathing behind her, could hear Hartwell's satisfied smile, even though smiles made no sound. She should have been overjoyed, should have been weeping with relief. This was salvation. This was vindication. This was everything she had lost returned. But all she felt was panic. Because if she went back to Philadelphia, she would have to leave Wyoming, would have to leave the ranch, the patients who paid in chickens and firewood, the garden with its stubborn vegetables, the mornings feeding vicious chickens, the evenings on the porch with Jacob. Jacob. She would have to leave Jacob. "I need time to think," Clara said. Eleanor's face fell. "Of course, I'm staying at the hotel." "Take all the time you need." She left. The door closed behind her, and Clara stood, holding proof of her innocence like it was a death sentence. Hartwell stood, walked to his cabinet, poured 3 glasses of whiskey, offered one to Clara, one to Jacob. "Well," he said. That was unexpected. Clara ignored the whiskey. "You brought her here. You contacted her." "I did my due diligence. When I suspected who you were, I made inquiries. Mrs. Vanderbilt was quite eager to help once she learned of your whereabouts." "Why?" Hartwell's smile never wavered. "Because, Dr. Ashford, I am not actually interested in blackmailing you. I'm interested in recruiting you." He gestured to the papers on his desk, the prescription forms. "I have a thriving practice, but I need help, real help, someone with surgical skill, someone who can handle complicated cases. I thought perhaps leverage would convince you, but it seems Mrs. Vanderbilt has provided better incentive." Clara stared at him. "You want me to stay, to work with you? I want you to consider all your options. Philadelphia offers prestige, but Wyoming offers freedom. No one here cares that you're a woman. They care that you can set bones and deliver babies and save lives. That's worth something, isn't it?" And the laudanum prescriptions, Hartwell's expression did not change. "A misunderstanding. I treat a number of patients with chronic pain. Mining accidents, war injuries, the prescriptions are legitimate." He was lying. Clara knew it, could see it in the way he held himself, too controlled, too careful. But proving it was another matter. "I need to go," Clara said. She walked out. Jacob followed. They mounted their horses and rode back toward the ranch in silence. Halfway there, Clara pulled her horse to a stop, sat in the saddle, staring at nothing. "What are you going to do?" Jacob asked. "I don't know. Philadelphia is a good opportunity." "I know. You'd be chief of surgery. You'd change women's medicine, make a real difference." "I know." Jacob was quiet. Then he said, "But you don't want to go." Clara looked at him, at this man who had become what friend seemed too small a word. Partner, maybe. Companion, something that did not have a name yet, but felt essential. "No," she said. "I don't want to go." "Then don't. It's not that simple." "Why not?" Clara opened her mouth. Closed it. Because how could she tell him that she had spent her whole life working toward exactly what Eleanor was offering? That walking away from it felt like betraying every sacrifice she had made, every hour of study, every fight against prejudice, every patient she had saved while being told women could not be surgeons. How could she explain that wanting to stay felt like giving up because, she said finally, because I worked so hard to get here, to prove myself, and if I don't go back, if I choose Wyoming over Philadelphia, then Marcus Webb wins, then all those people who said women couldn't be doctors were right. Jacob's expression softened. Or maybe you're choosing a different kind of medicine. Maybe both are valuable. Maybe. They rode the rest of the way in silence. That night, Clara could not sleep. She lay in bed and tried to imagine herself in Philadelphia, chief of surgery, white coat, operating theater, respectability. It felt like wearing someone else's skin. She rose, walked to the window. The moon was full, bright enough to cast shadows, bright enough to see the mountains in the distance. A knock at her door, soft. Clara, Jacob again. Come in. He entered, carried 2 cups, coffee probably, or whiskey, hard to tell in the moonlight. Thought you might be awake, he said. Can't shut my mind off. Jacob handed her a cup, whiskey. She sipped. It burned. They stood at the window together, looking out at the silver landscape. Before either of them could speak hoofbeats, fast, multiple horses. Jacob moved to the window. Riders, coming hard. They went outside, the moon bright enough to see clearly. 5 horses, men in dark clothes. One wore a badge that caught the light. Marshal. Clara's stomach dropped. Eleanor had said the charges were dropped. But maybe there was a warrant she did not know about. Maybe this was the end after all. The marshal dismounted. Older man, maybe 50, weathered face, kind eyes. He touched his hat. Mr. Cole. Ma'am, I'm Marshal David Garrett. I need to speak with you both. It's about Sarah Cole's death. Jacob went still, completely still, like a prey animal sensing danger. What about it? He asked. I received information, an anonymous letter, alleging that Mrs. Cole did not die of natural causes, that she was murdered. The word hung in the cold air. Murdered. I have a court order, Garrett continued, to exhume the body, to examine the remains. I'm sorry. I know this is difficult, but I have to follow the law. Jacob's face had gone gray. Clara stepped forward. Marshal, I'm a physician. If there are questions about Mrs. Cole's death, I can help examine the evidence. Garrett looked at her. You're the nurse, the one who's been treating folks. I'm a doctor, and I have experience with forensic medicine. Then I'd be grateful for your assistance, ma'am. They exhumed Sarah's body the next morning. The grave was in a small cemetery behind the ranch. Simple headstone. Sarah Cole, beloved wife, 1852 to 1883. The coffin came up heavy with earth. The men opened it carefully, respectfully. Sarah's body was remarkably preserved. The cold climate, the dry air. She looked almost peaceful, like she was sleeping. Garrett brought samples from the examination, hair, tissue from her liver, bone fragments. I'll send these to Denver. There's a new laboratory there. They can test for poisons, narcotics, anything that might have caused or contributed to death. How long will that take? Jacob asked, his voice hollow. 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. The science is new. They're careful. And until then, Garrett's expression softened with genuine regret. Until then, Mr. Cole, I'm afraid I have to ask you not to leave the territory. You're not under arrest, not yet. But you're a person of interest in a potential murder investigation. Jacob nodded, numb. I understand. I'm sorry, Garrett said, and he meant it. Clara stood beside Sarah's grave, staring at the empty coffin, at the displaced earth, at the evidence of a life interrupted. And she thought about what Jacob had not told her, about the secrets he still carried, about the complicated truth of that night. If they found evidence in Sarah's remains, it would tell a story. But would it be the whole story? Or just pieces that could be twisted into whatever narrative suited those in power? She went back to the house, to Jacob's room, the room he never slept in, the room he kept exactly as Sarah had left it. There, in a trunk at the foot of the bed, Clara found what she was looking for. Sarah's medical records, kept by Jacob in meticulous detail. a surgeon's precision applied to his wife's decline. Clara read through them, page after page, dating back 2 years. January 1883, Sarah complaining of headaches, prescribed laudanum for pain. March 1883, headaches worsening, increased laudanum dose. May 1883, Sarah unable to sleep, added morphine for rest. July 1883, Sarah agitated, increased morphine. August 1883, Sarah barely eating, pupils constricted, dose increased again. September 1883, Sarah died. Clara cross-referenced the dates with something else she found in the trunk. Receipts from Hartwell's office, laudanum purchased. January through September, regular as clockwork. But the quantities did not match Jacob's prescriptions. Sarah was buying more than Jacob was prescribing, much more. The waiting was worse than arrest would have been. 6 weeks passed like years. Jacob worked the ranch mechanically, fed horses, mended fences, avoided the bedroom where Sarah had died. Clara kept the clinic running, treated patients, gathered evidence against Hartwell, and every night she reviewed Sarah's medical records, looking for something, anything that might save Jacob. The answer came on a cold January morning. A telegram from Denver. Test results complete. Stop. Morphine sulfate detected in tissue samples. Stop. Levels consistent with fatal overdose. Stop. Marshal Garrett notified. Stop. Clara read it 3 times. Then she went to find Jacob. He was in the barn, mucking stalls, doing the work that let him not think. The results came back, she said. Jacob's hand stopped. The pitchfork hung suspended. And morphine, fatal levels. He closed his eyes. So she was poisoned. Or she took too much, accidentally or otherwise. The implication hung between them. Suicide, accidental overdose, murder, all equally possible with the evidence they had. Garrett's coming tomorrow, Clara said. He'll have to make an arrest. I know. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat up reviewing everything she knew, Sarah's symptoms over those final months, the progressive deterioration, the purchases from Hartwell's office, the pattern of addiction, and something else, something she had noticed in the medical records but not fully understood. Sarah's final entry, written in Jacob's hand but shaking, almost illegible. Patient unresponsive, respiratory depression severe, pupils constricted to pinpoints, no response to stimulus, time of death 11:47 p.m. No mention of struggle, no mention of violence. Just clinical observation of a body shutting down. If Jacob had done something violent, if there had been a fight, wouldn't there be some note of it, some acknowledgement? Unless he had written this after whatever happened, after the guilt set in. Clara needed more information, and she knew where to find it. Clara went to the bunkhouse, found Miguel. I need to go to town. Can you watch the ranch? Of course. You okay, Doc? No, but I will be. She rode to redemption. Went straight to Hartwell's office. He was with a patient. Clara waited. When the patient left, she walked in without knocking. Dr. Ashford, Hartwell said. To what do I owe the pleasure? Sarah Cole. You treated her. I treated many people. You sold her laudanum, morphine, more than any legitimate prescription would allow. Hartwell's smile thinned. Mrs. Cole had chronic pain. I provided relief. You created an addict. You kept increasing her doses, kept her dependent, kept her buying. That's a serious accusation. Clara pulled the receipts from her bag, slammed them on his desk. These are from your own records. Proof that you sold Sarah Cole enough morphine to kill a horse. Over 9 months. While she got sicker and sicker. Hartwell looked at the receipts. His expression did not change. Mrs. Cole was in pain. I helped her. If she took more than prescribed, that's not my responsibility. You knew. You had to know. And you kept selling anyway. Can you prove that? Clara could not. She had receipts, but not testimony. Had evidence of sales, but not of intent. Hartwell leaned back in his chair. Here's what I think happened. Sarah Cole had a problem. An addiction. She hid it from her husband. Bought medicine from me. Took too much one night. Died. Tragic, but not criminal. Unless someone was profiting from that addiction. Show me the law that says selling medicine is wrong. Clara wanted to hit him. Wanted to grab him and shake him until he admitted what he had done. But violence would not help Jacob. Evidence would. She left. Rode to the hotel, found Eleanor Vanderbilt in her room. "I need your help," Clara said. Eleanor listened while Clara explained. About Sarah, about the morphine, about Jacob in legal limbo, about Hartwell's operation. When Clara finished, Eleanor was quiet. Then she said, "What do you need?" "A lawyer, the best you can afford. Someone who can defend Jacob and expose Hartwell." "Done. I'll telegraph Denver tonight. And I need access to medical records from Hartwell's office. Proof of how much he was selling, to whom, over how long." "That's illegal." "I know." Eleanor smiled. "Good. Let's do it." They broke into Hartwell's office that night. Eleanor kept watch while Clara searched, found the ledgers, found years of prescriptions, found a pattern that made her stomach turn. Hartwell was not just selling to addicts, he was creating them. Starting patients on small doses for legitimate pain, then increasing more until they could not function without the medicine, until they would pay anything for relief. Sarah Cole was not unique. She was one of dozens. Clara copied everything: names, dates, amounts. By dawn, she had enough evidence to bury Hartwell. They arrested Jacob on a Tuesday, gray sky, snow threatening but not falling. Marshal Garrett looked genuinely pained as he fitted the handcuffs. "I'm sorry, Jacob, but the evidence is clear. Fatal morphine poisoning. And you were the only person with her when she died." "I didn't kill her," Jacob said, his voice flat, empty. "That's for a jury to decide." They took him to Redemption, to the small jail behind the marshal's office. 2 cells, one drunk sleeping it off, 1 cell for Jacob. Clara watched them go. Then she turned to Eleanor, who had stayed through the waiting. "We have 6 weeks until trial," Clara said. "Maybe less. We need to prove what really happened. Not just that Sarah died from morphine, but how it got into her system. And why." Eleanor nodded. "What do you need?" "Margaret Kelly should be here soon. We need to coordinate everything. Medical evidence, Hartwell's records, testimony from his other victims. I'll handle the logistics. You focus on the medicine." The trial came in late February, 6 weeks after Jacob's arrest. Long enough for winter to settle deep, long enough for fear to become familiar. The courtroom was packed. Everyone in Redemption wanted to see. The rancher accused of murdering his wife. The lady doctor who was not a lady at all, but something more complicated. The respected town physician whose reputation was suddenly in question. Clara sat in the front row, Eleanor beside her. The lawyer Eleanor had hired was good, sharp. A woman from Denver named Margaret Kelly, who wore trousers under her skirt and carried law books like weapons. The prosecutor went first, presented the evidence. Sarah Cole's remains contained massive amounts of morphine, enough to kill. The hyoid bone showed signs of pressure, consistent with strangulation. Jacob sat silent, expressionless, a man who had already accepted his fate. Then Margaret Kelly stood. "The defense calls Dr. Clara Margaret Ashford." The courtroom went silent. Clara stood, walked to the witness stand. The bailiff held out a Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth?" Clara looked at Jacob, at Eleanor, at the people who had believed in her when she could not believe in herself. "I do." She stated her name, her credentials. Let the truth fall where it would. "I am Dr. Clara Margaret Ashford. I trained at Pennsylvania Hospital. I served as chief surgical resident before I was forced to flee due to false accusations of criminal activity. Those accusations have since been disproved. I am here today as a physician and as someone who knows the truth about Sarah Cole's death." The courtroom exploded. Voices raised. The judge banged his gavel. "Order, order." When the room quieted, Margaret Kelly approached. "Dr. Ashford, you examined Sarah Cole's medical records. What did you find?" Clara pulled out the documents, the receipts, the ledgers. "I found that Sarah Cole was addicted to morphine, that her addiction was created and sustained by Dr. Theodore Hartwell, that over 9 months Dr. Hartwell sold her increasing quantities of narcotics, that he knew she was becoming dependent and continued to supply her anyway." She looked directly at Hartwell. He sat in the back row, still smiling. Sarah Cole died of respiratory failure caused by morphine overdose. The amount in her system was consistent with the quantities Dr. Hartwell was selling her. The pressure on her hyoid bone was minimal, post-mortem, applied after death, not before. How can you be certain? Kelly asked. Because live tissue bruises differently than dead tissue. Live tissue bleeds, dead tissue does not. The pressure marks on Sarah Cole's throat show no evidence of bleeding, which means they occurred after her heart stopped, after the morphine had already killed her. The courtroom was silent, every eye on Clara. Mystery on by. Cole believed he caused his wife's death, Clara continued, her voice steady, strong. During a PTSD episode, he put pressure on her throat, but by that time, Sarah was already gone, already dead from the morphine. He did not kill her. The addiction killed her. And Dr. Hartwell created that addiction. Hartwell stood. This is absurd. I treated Mrs. Cole for legitimate pain. Then explain these ledgers, Clara said. She held them up. Explain why you sold morphine to Sarah Cole in quantities far exceeding any legitimate prescription. Explain why you did the same for 23 other patients. Explain why your income increased 40% in the year you started this practice. Hartwell's face went red. Those records are private. You had no right. I had every right. A man's life is at stake. The judge leaned forward. Dr. Hartwell, do you have an explanation for these records? Hartwell's smile was gone. I want a lawyer. Then you're going to need one. Marshal, take Dr. Hartwell into custody, pending investigation into allegations of criminal distribution of narcotics. They arrested Hartwell right there in the courtroom. Clara watched him go, watched his careful composure crack, watched him understand that he had lost. Then the judge spoke again. As for Mr. Cole, based on Dr. Ashford's testimony and the medical evidence, I'm dismissing all charges. Sir, you're free to go. Jacob stood, slowly, like he did not quite believe it. The marshal removed his handcuffs. Clara stepped down from the witness stand, met Jacob in the aisle. They looked at each other, two people who had carried impossible weight, who had believed themselves guilty of unforgivable things, who had learned that truth was more complicated than shame. Thank you, Jacob said. You would have done the same. I don't know. Maybe. They walked out of the courtroom together, into cold November sunshine. The ranges stood dark against a sky still holding afternoon brightness. Eleanor was waiting on the courthouse steps. That was magnificent, Clara smiled, tired, relieved. Thank you for everything. What will you do now? Eleanor asked. The offer still stands. Philadelphia, chief of surgery, a chance to change medicine. Clara looked at the mountains, at the prairie stretching endless and gold, at Jacob standing beside her, a man who was not asking her to stay, was not asking her for anything, just standing, waiting, accepting whatever she chose. I'm staying, Clara said. Eleanor's face fell, just slightly. Are you certain? Yes. But Philadelphia, the work you could do, the lives you could save. I can save lives here too, different lives maybe, in different ways, but no less important. She thought about Sarah, about the addiction Hartwell had created, about the veterans like Pete with their war nightmares, about the people who hurt not just in body but in mind and spirit. I want to build something, Clara said, a clinic, not just for injuries, for what happens after, for addiction, for trauma, for the things that keep people broken even after their bodies heal. Jacob was looking at her, something in his expression she had never seen before. Hope, maybe, or possibility. Sarah wanted that, he said quietly, a place where people could heal completely, not just physically. Then let's build it for her, Sarah's Hope Clinic, Eleanor smiled, sad but genuine. Then I suppose I'll have to find another chief of surgery. You'll find someone wonderful, someone who needs Philadelphia the way I need Wyoming. They embraced. Eleanor held on tight. If you ever change your mind, I won't, but thank you for giving me the choice. Eleanor left on the afternoon coach. Clara and Jacob stood on the porch and watched the dust settle. Sarah's Hope Clinic, Jacob said. You meant that every word. It'll be hard. We'll need funding, supplies, probably another doctor or two. The town won't make it easy, I know, and we'll have to figure out how to treat things medicine barely understands. Addiction, trauma, the wounds that don't show. I know. Jacob turned to face her. Why are you choosing this? You could have prestige, respect, everything you worked for. Clara thought about it, really thought. Because in Philadelphia I would be proving I'm as good as men. Here I can be better than what medicine has been. I can help create something new, something that sees people as whole, not just bodies to fix. She looked at him. And because I want to work with you, not for you, not under you, with you, as equals, as partners. Partners, Jacob repeated, testing the word. If you want, I want. They stood on the porch as the sun moved across the sky. The western sky bled orange and gold. We should start planning, Clara said finally. Figure out what we need, how to fund it. Tonight, let's just be. So they sat on the bench. The same bench they had sat on dozens of times before, but different now. The silence between them no longer empty, filled instead with possibility. They did not kiss, did not declare love, did not need to. Some things were understood without words. 6 months later, Sarah's Hope Clinic opened its doors. Not fancy, just a large room in the barn, whitewashed walls, 3 beds, shelves with medicines, a stove for warmth, but also books, journals, art supplies, things for the mind as well as the body. The first patient was a veteran from the next county. Nightmares, flashbacks, shaking hands that could not hold a rifle anymore, but could not let it go either. Clara and Jacob worked together. She handled the medical side. The medications to help him sleep, the techniques to ground him when panic took over. Jacob handled the rest, sat with the man, told his own stories, showed that surviving was possible, that healing took time but was real. The veteran stayed 2 weeks, left calmer, not cured, but better. Word spread. More patients came, men and women both. Some with addictions, some with trauma, some with both. They paid what they could, worked when they were able, became part of something larger than their individual pain. Clara discovered she was good at this. Not just the medicine, the listening, the patience, the understanding that healing was not linear, that people needed time and space and compassion as much as they needed treatment. And Jacob became himself again, or maybe became himself for the first time. The surgeon who had run from failure learned to sit with it, to accept that some wounds took years to heal, that some never healed completely, but that life could be full anyway. On a cold March evening, Clara sat in her office, the small room she had claimed in the barn, reviewing patient notes, planning treatments. A knock. Jacob with 2 cups of coffee. Busy, he asked. Always. He sat across from her. They had fallen into this rhythm. End of each day. Coffee. Conversation. Sometimes about patients, sometimes about nothing. Eleanor sent a letter, Jacob said. The Philadelphia hospital is thriving. They've hired 3 female surgeons, changed admission policies. She says you inspired it. Clara smiled. Good. She also says if you ever want to visit, you're welcome. Maybe someday. Jacob was quiet. Then he said, do you ever regret it, staying here instead of going back? Clara thought about Philadelphia, the operating theaters, the prestige, the life she could have had. No, she said, I don't regret it. This is where I'm meant to be. Even though it's hard, even though we're struggling for funding, even though half the town still thinks women shouldn't be doctors, especially because of those things, because we're building something that matters, something real. Jacob looked at her. I'm glad you stayed. So am I. They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, the last light faded. Stars began to appear, bright and hard and infinite. A bell rang, the emergency bell they had installed by the clinic entrance. Clara stood, grabbed her medical bag. Jacob followed. A wagon in the yard, a man shouting. Help! Please, someone help! Clara ran. This was her life now, running toward emergency, running toward need, running toward the work that mattered, and beside her, always Jacob, partner, equal, friend. They reached the wagon together, a woman inside, bleeding, pregnant. In labor, but something wrong. Clara's hands moved automatically. Assessment, diagnosis, plan. We need to get her inside, she said. Jacob prepped the surgical instruments. This baby's breech. They worked through the night. Clara's hands steady as she performed an emergency cesarean. Jacob assisting, handing instruments, monitoring vitals, moving in perfect synchronization. The baby came at dawn. A girl. Red and angry and perfectly alive. The mother survived. Would heal. Would go home in a week with her daughter in her arms. Clara washed her hands, scrubbed away blood and birth. Looked at her reflection in the small mirror above the wash basin. She looked different than she had a year ago. Older, tired, but also stronger, more certain. Dr. Clara Margaret Ashford, not running anymore, not hiding, just being, just working, just living the life she had chosen. Jacob appeared in the doorway. "Coffee, please." They walked to the house, the sun breaking over the mountains, gold light flooding the prairie, turning everything bright and new. On the porch, their bench waited. Clara poured coffee from the pot Jacob had left warming on the stove. The steam curled up into cold air, disappearing against the brightening sky. They sat, not side by side this time, but facing each other, knees nearly touching, close enough to see the exhaustion in each other's faces, close enough to understand without words. "Another one saved," Jacob said. "Another one saved," Clara agreed. In the distance, smoke rose from homesteads, people waking, starting their days, living their lives, some of them healthy because of what Clara and Jacob built, some of them healing, some of them learning to live with wounds that would never fully close. And that was enough, more than enough. Clara sipped her coffee, felt the warmth spread through her chest, felt Wyoming settle into her bones, felt home in a way she never had before. "Thank you," she said. Jacob looked at her. "For what? For giving me a reason to stay." He was quiet. Then he said, "You gave yourself that reason. I just offered a place to do it." "Then thank you for the place. You're welcome." They sat until the work called them back, a patient arriving, a bell ringing, the day asserting itself. Then they stood, together, and walked back toward the life they were building, back to the work, back to the life they had built from the ashes of the lives they lost. And it was good, hard, imperfect, real, but good. Behind them, the bench stood empty, waiting for evening, for the next quiet moment, for the next conversation, for the next shared silence that said everything words could not. The mountains watched, eternal, indifferent, beautiful. And in the valley below, two people who had learned to stop running finally found peace, not in the absence of struggle, but in the presence of purpose, not in safety, but in meaning, not in the life they planned, but in the life they chose. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, that is enough. Sometimes it is everything.